रोशनी का कारवां I wait ये है रोशनी 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 का कारवां रोशनी I wait ये है रोशनी का कारवां.
Hi, my name is George Abraham, and welcome to this edition of Highway Conversations. My guest today is a very special lady from Hyderabad, and her name is Payal Kapoor. Hi, Payal, and welcome to Highway Conversations.
Hi, George. Hi, George. Thanks for having me here.
So, Payal, one thing we have in common is both of us had meningitis. Of course, I had meningitis when I was 10 months old, and that impacted my retina, my optic nerves, and right from the time I can remember, I had a very, very strong visual impairment. Tell me a little bit about your experience with meningitis.
Yours was still, I think you were really young to even realize what meningitis was all about. But in my case, I was, old enough and aware of all the pain that went with it. I was just short of 22 years old when I first had this problem. And in my case, unfortunately, the meningitis was not even diagnosed. There was no official diagnosis of meningitis, which was what caused half the problem. And it eventually, ended up with me losing my eyesight. My spinal fluid pressure rose because of that, and because it was undiagnosed and untreated. And it hit the entire sensory system of my brain, which in a span of a week took from me my eyesight, which was until then 20/20, and brought it down to zero.
Yeah.
It impacted my other senses as well. My sense of taste and smell, my hearing, as well as my sense of touch. So it pretty much destroyed my entire sensory system to a great extent.
Total Payal lockdown.
Completely, yes. I know we have to be with the times. So in today's parlance, yes, it was a total lockdown, all right.
So but you are speaking now, you can hear now. So how did all that happen?
Yes, correct. I think we had this discussion once earlier also about how fortunately my speech wasn't taken from me. So I think it was about almost 1 full year that was spent like this with treatments and with hospitalization, which was 2 stints for over 2 months, and then flying to Bombay and consult some of the country's best neurologists and things like that. So basically, at that point in time, the best neurologist of the country told me that I would eventually vegetate, and nothing could be done for me. And he wanted to perform a surgery on my spine and that kind of stuff. And my dad told him that no, please, we'll take her as a vegetable. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Little did he know, or little did we know, that life would again, turn, and this time for the better.
Yeah.
Some alternate therapy, some, homeopathy, acupuncture, and all of those kind of things helped me recover. If you ask me today exactly what helped, I don't know. But my over a period of time, my sense of smell and taste recovered gradually.
Very good.
My hearing recovered gradually. So now, 28 years later, I can hear from 1 year about 99%. I have some amount of perception in my left ear, although I can't really hear. It doesn't have the, speech part sort of still tuned in. My sight is still zero.
Yeah, I remember when I met you first, I had to make sure that I sat on the right side.
Absolutely, yeah. Yes, I still have to make these very, very frantic gestures. And when people are trying to say something to me, I make these frantic gestures and tell them that I can't hear you from my left. Please speak from my right.
Correct.
So I've been lucky in that regard. This is what has basically helped me a great deal.
So
And
let's,
I now feel like I'm okay.
right. So let's step back a little bit before
Mm.
22. Tell us a little bit about your life before you were 22. Tell us a little bit about your childhood, your family, your schooling.
It was a good time. I mean, till 22, everything was fabulous and really interesting. And I was a regular, normal, child growing up in Hyderabad. My parents had settled here in
Right.
Hyderabad. Basically, my dad had a job here, and I grew up in Hyderabad with my parents and a younger sister who's 4 years younger than I am.
Right.
And we've been in Hyderabad all our lives. So I studied in an all-girls school called Nasar, which was a wonderful experience. And, I think the basis, the foundation of who I am today was probably laid there. Love for language, love for writing, love for,
Talking.
lot of things came from there. Continued. Basically, I've been in Hyderabad all my life, and with the usual things to do, usual hobbies that young girls would, go with: reading and meeting friends, and of course, talking. You would know that. So,
Right. Any
that's it.
any romance that you had before your big?
Yes, there was just a lot of romance with a lot of romantic literature that makes you the usual starry-eyed teenager, hoping for some fabulous things in life. And I did my hotel management, and it was a fabulous 3 years of a lot of hard work, like really put through the ringer. But
Yeah.
it was extremely interesting. And in fact, I was to be married before this entire thing went down, and I fell ill. I was to be married in the next 3-4 months, but unfortunately, after this, I think it was just too much to take. So it eventually didn't happen that way, and then that's it. I mean, life sort of just went on in a totally different way.
So at 21, when you were kind of finishing your hotel management, and I believe you started working as well.
Yes, I did. Yes.
You were working with the Oberoi Group at that point of time.
Yes.
So at that point of time, if you were to kind of think back and look ahead, what was your dreams for, say, you are now around half a century old. So, what did you think you would be at this time of your life?
Well, definitely, if I had continued working, I think I would be probably like a lot of my peers, either heading some hotel of some big chain somewhere, or maybe being an entrepreneur, probably running my own restaurant, or since cooking is such a passion with me, and knowing about food is such a passion with me, I would definitely have been somewhere there. That's I think basically. Or I could have also, I was a very people's person, which is something I didn't realize until I actually started working at the front desk.
Right.
How much I enjoyed people. I had always envisioned myself a chef.
Yes.
Not just because of my love for food and love for cooking and the ingredients, but also because I was people shy, or at least I thought I was people shy, and oh God, how am I going to speak with somebody and things like that. But I stepped onto the reception desk, and after the initial few training and jitters and everything, I realized that I was ready to fly, and I enjoyed my interactions with my guests and people who came in. So yes, who knows? I could have probably been a PR person somewhere. Don't know, George. I would have definitely been out there doing something, or maybe become an activist. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe fighting for another cause, though.
Absolutely, something or the other would have come my way. But I know that I would have been sitting at home doing nothing, for a fact.
Right. So then meningitis struck, and you were bedridden for a while. So how did your journey resume post meningitis?
Long journey there again. It was a long and very scary, dark and lonesome road. For me, I say lonesome because this was something that I had to do on my own and I was going through on my own. Although I have to admit that I was probably one of the most fortunate people because I had an extremely supportive environment around me. My parents were extremely supportive. They almost gave up their lives to ensure that I got all the attention and all the care that I needed. My sister, who was still, who had just entered her graduation, also did a lot of running around with me. So there were a lot of sacrifices, which really brought me out of the entire despair that I had fallen into. And
Yeah, you could call it maybe sacrifices or acts of love, maybe.
it was acts of love,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
I feel it was a sacrifice because it was, their lives almost came to a standstill because of me. It was an act of love. We
Yeah.
were always a family who stuck together, and we were a nuclear family who had lived on our own, away from extended family and relatives and things like that. So through thick and thin, it was just the four of us. So
Right.
it was definitely an act of love, but. So that's basically it. It was a long road, 6 years, I would say, of complete denial because I had been told that I would probably see again. So it was, you cling to that little hope and wish that it comes true for you, but it wasn't happening day after day after day. And people kept popping, well-meaning friends would come and say, okay, why don't you learn Braille? And, Braille was a dreaded word. It meant that I had to accept that I was blind. And
Yes.
no, I kicked and fussed about it. And I said, no, I didn't want to do it at all.
One question here. You said you had lost most of your senses when the dreaded disease struck. But how quickly did you regain your hearing and your sense of smell and touch and so on?
It was a gradual process. I think my the first sound that I heard, I still remember, was a sound of a crow somewhere far away in the background. It almost felt like that my ear had been blocked with air or water or something like that, and it popped and I could hear a faraway sound. I think it was about 5 months down the line after I first lost it.
Right.
But the progress from there was very gradual. So I think it was over a period of about maybe 2 years that I actually started hearing clearly, and my sense of smell and taste developed, because initially it wasn't okay. I mean, I couldn't taste things completely. Today with the entire COVID test of, losing your smell and taste, I know exactly what it's like. So it doesn't come back very easily. It takes a lot from you.
I know.
I think about 2 years, perhaps, George. I think about there.
And then your mind took another 4 years.
Yes, totally. My body, there was absolutely no cooperation over there. My body fought my mind all the time.
So how did that change of the mind happen? Meaning, did somebody
I got fed up. I think I just got tired of being miserable. I think I just got tired of, having to depend on people for everything, starting from how to apply toothpaste on my toothbrush to, being led around everywhere, to somebody reading my books, because I'm a very, very, voracious reader, and I loved my books, and everything was taken away. So someone used to read to me, someone took me out. I think basically just got fed up of going down the rabbit hole. It had to stop somewhere.
In all this, probably you also put on some weight, I guess.
No, actually I didn't. I lost weight because I had put on all the weight with all the steroids that had been pumped into me, lots of them. Okay. I had become a blimp. But once all of that starts receding, and then because there was that, little bit of depression over there also with this entire, I won't be able to see how will life go on kind of thing. So luckily for me, fortunately for me, I didn't go towards the binge food way. I went the other way. So it sort of kept it all in check for me. Yes, it did.
So tell us the story of the turnaround then. How did it all turn around after 6 years?
Like I said, I got fed up, and then those well-meaning friends who had always hovered in the periphery, and sometimes were brave enough to come in front of me when I didn't pitch a fit about it. One of them knew this, this gentleman who I had also heard of from other friends, who was blind himself. He was called Mario Thompson. He was blind himself, and ran this organization called Caring Aid for the Visually Impaired. And he he rehabilitated people with vision loss.
Right.
So they said, why don't you at least go and meet him, have a conversation with him and see what is to come of it. Right. And that's what I did. I think it was time. This was the road that was going to finally turn at the crossroads. So I went and I met him, and he was an extremely energetic and very, very, positive and an extremely convincing man, who told me that there was life outside of this entire space that I had, locked myself into, this little bubble.
Yes.
And that's when he showed me, and he told me all the options that there were. And he told me that there were audiobooks I could listen to, and there was, reading and writing I could do with learning Braille, and I could do all the things that I did with a little bit of difference. So I think that sort of helped me, put things into perspective and look at a new future for myself.
So this was the advice he gave you, but did he also help you with helping you get into that new way of living and looking at life?
Yes. He did. It wasn't easy. Again, like I said, it was, there were a lot of things that were right in front of me that, I wasn't willing to see. But this also was going to take time, because at every juncture there was like a hurdle. Learning Braille was not easy.
Yeah.
And you have to remember that my sense of touch was still patchy. So reading Braille was not a cakewalk at all. I had to figure out which hand I could use to be able to read, because my right hand, even today, 28 years later, is not the best, although I do everything with it, but the sensation is still not all there.
Right.
So there was a hurdle at every step. There was something that, stopped me from moving ahead, but he was just, I think he just overruled everything I said and everything I wanted to do. And he cajoled and he forced and he laughed at me. I still remember I'm still in touch with him today. Yeah. And he tells me, he asks me, you keep writing about me and saying that I'm, made you cry. I said, of course I made you cry. And every time you made me cry, but every time I cried, you laughed. You thought it was extremely funny. But all of it in the end was the minute you start getting familiar with something, the minute you start figuring out your way around anything new, and once you have that in your grip, then I think your that confidence, which disappears when you're still trying new things, sort of slowly reappears, and it makes that that things that much better. Your sense of self improves. Your own belief in your own self improves, and I think things start looking up from there. And my deep depths of depression and despair, I think, was slowly sort of ending, and I was moving out of that rabbit hole upwards.
Yeah, and I think it's about being willing to get out of your comfort zone, right?
Absolutely.
You don't know what
I have a problem. Yeah, I have a problem with new beginnings with most things.
I think that's true with everybody, meaning most people are scared of new beginnings. There are so many uncertainties and so many questions that, kind of challenge you.
It's the fear of the unknown, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess so. So along with Mario Thompson, what were the things that you learned? What were the discoveries you made about yourself?
For one, I think the most beautiful thing was that I realized that I didn't need to be able to see to do everything.
Yeah,
I think that is probably one of the biggest discoveries for a person who started with not wanting to sit on a friend's kinetic Honda because she thought she'd fall off it. Because I used to, when she first told me, why don't you, and I had ridden with her right through because we studied together and we used to live close by and we used to go and come together. She told me, come, I'll take you for a ride. And I said, no, how will I get onto that bike? I'll fall. She said, are you crazy? How will you fall? But I didn't want to do it. I realized then when it came to eating at a restaurant for the first time, I was petrified that, I'd make a mess and I'd spill everything and my food would not go in my mouth and my noodles will go into someone else's plate and all those concerns I had. But I suddenly realized I didn't need to worry about any of it because I didn't need to be doing everything, from my own things to things for other people. So I think that was the most fabulous discovery, to know that your sight was, after all, not indispensable. It was not something that you couldn't live or work without.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thought. That's a beautiful thought, actually, that your sight disappears doesn't mean that you can't do things.
Absolutely. Because I realized, and fortunately for me, over a period of time, as my sense of taste and smell developed, I realized that there was so much more of the world that I actually took in. I always say this in my talks, and when I'm talking to people about it, that's the one thing that comes to my mind, that most people tend to depend only on their eyesight. They're always looking, seeing things. They're not absorbing anything. So I always tell them to close their eyes, and you want to actually enjoy your food, shut your eyes and just, taste it. You want to smell your surroundings. Especially when you're traveling or you're going out somewhere, shut your eyes, because that's the only time you will take in something. So that's basically, those are a few things which were, I think, the most wondrous, discoveries that I made for myself. And of course, my strength, I realized that I had a resilience that I didn't know was very, very well present within me, because as much as I wanted to, sort of just throw in the towel and say, no, I can't do this and walk away, but I couldn't bring myself to do it.
It's a pity that people realize that they have a quality like resilience only when they are thrown into the deep end.
True. Very true. I mean, it becomes so much easier, but then that's, I think, also probably because it's never tested, right? I mean, when you're doing things, unless it's tested, you don't know it's there. I think everybody realizes that they have some amount of determination and grit, but to be put to, it's the acid test really that
absolutely
that brings it out.
So when did you kind of think of getting back to working? Because I think you spent close to 6 to 7 years kind of getting to terms with things. So when did you think of actually starting to work, and what made you think that you can actually work?
It was very organic, actually. I was very lucky that way. All happened very organically. The organization where I was rehabilitated, which we call CAVI, I was still, going through my rehabilitation, my Braille. I had learned the basics and I had done various things, and I had also had my orientation with living skills and things like that. When Mario, moved, he was moving to the UK. And at that point in time, he told me, he said, okay, the rest of your Braille learning you can do on your own, because I've seen that you can manage and things like that, and you don't need my help anymore. All the books are available. You can sit and go ahead with this. And also, since he was moving, he needed somebody to be there to do things with him. So they were the people who first hired me part-time to begin with, and then later full-time. And I became a resource person over there. And I realized that it was so simple to sort of, give what you receive. I was, on the one hand, I had received this from them, and it was so simple to just pass it on.
Right. So a little bit about this organization. Does it still exist? And when you took it over, or when you started working there, was Mario was Mario the guy who started and set it up and continued to run it? Or what is how did it all work?
Well, he did set up the organization, yes, but when he moved on, someone else took it over from his family itself. His brother was used to work with us and things like that. Then I think over a period of time, it doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. But over a period of time, I think for the 6 years that I was there, they worked with, he worked, and then he went away and somebody else came in and things like that. I was there for almost 6.5 years. I think, and then just like any small organization that was, funded by a certain group of people, they also ran into some sort of funding issues and things like that. And I think eventually they scaled down to becoming simply a library or something like that. And they couldn't have, I couldn't, work there anymore, and they decided to sort of shut the organization down. And as much as I don't know much about the organization, but yes, I still keep in touch with him from time to time, and I share. He's very happy and very proud of my journey to see where I started, because he saw me right at the beginning, and 28 years later, I think I've sort of done him proud, even if I say so myself.
Highway, ये है रोशनी का कारवां।